the Legal Corner podcast series. Welcome to today's episode of The Legal Corner, a podcast which covers a variety of legal issues to keep you informed. Hosted by attorney at law Colin Dinoon and communications specialist Leonardo Torres.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Legal Corner podcast series. I am your host, Colin Dinoon, attorney at law, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Leonardo Torres, our resident communication specialist. How are you today, Leonardo?
Very, very good, Colin. How are you doing?
I am excellent. Is it raining on your side today? I know we've been having some inclement weather.
No, actually the place has been quite sunny today. You know, the complete opposite of the last couple of days, especially Tuesday. Some big floods in Port of Spain area.
Right. Well, on the south side, we were spared a lot of that torrential rainfall, but even today is a bit overcast. You know, thankfully there's no great downpour.
Right,
You know,
that's good.
April showers are coming in.
Correct.
You know. All right. And to all our regular listeners, we say thank you for your continued support. If you are listening to this podcast for the first time, you may be wondering, what is the Legal Corner podcast? Well, the Legal Corner podcast series is a bi-monthly show originating in the Twin Island nation of Trinidad and Tobago and is aimed at providing you with insight into various aspects of the law. In today's episode, we will be looking at preventing child abuse. According to the Mayo Clinic, any intentional harm or mistreatment of a child under the age of 18 years old is considered child abuse. In Trinidad and Tobago, the organization that spearheads the efforts to protect the rights of children is the Children's Authority. This body has a mandate to be the guardian of all children and to undertake efforts to prevent them from harm. There have been recent discussions in our local public domain as it relates to parental discipline of children and whether there should be state intervention in this regard. We hope to ventilate some of these issues in this episode. The format of the show will be slightly different today, as Leonardo and I will be having a discussion on this topic as opposed to interviewing a guest. So, jumping right into it, I just want to say that, children are precious and that there shouldn't be any form of abuse or mistreatment of children. And if perhaps you are a child and you are being ill-treated by your parents or your caregivers and you are listening to us today, I want you to reach out for help. I want you not to be afraid. And I want you to take all steps that you can in order to safeguard yourself. Tell me what's your thoughts on what has been going on in this nation, boy, in terms of the children and the sort of abuse and all these different things like that.
Well, in my opinion, this topic tends to rear its head from time to time. And it is nothing strange to people currently who would have been looking at most recent news articles. I would say that is something really that rears its head from time to time. I think any death, any killing, or any sort of crime at all is unfortunate. But I think as human beings, it is particularly sad, it is particularly hurtful, and sometimes put persons in an emotional roller coaster when it involves women, and of course, what our episode is about today, children. My opinion on what has been going on is these stories no longer surprise me. It's just a surprise per se that it continues, right? But really and truly, I'm not surprised. I'm not to say my opinion has changed because there was an article last week and another one a few days before that. So it hasn't really affected my opinion, but I would think that the only surprise is that it continues for so long, and I think that it is about time the authorities step in. It's about time that we get some serious sensitization, particularly via media, whether it be socially that would reach a lot of children, or those urban type of radio stations where they tend to listen a lot to. Billboards as well that you would see, when they would probably be traversing to and from school. I hope that, the time is now where there would be a lot of sensitization through those mediums so that children have an outlet, they have a proper way to talk with a professional, and even listen to little skits that these ads sometimes provide that are sometimes quite engaging, in my opinion, whereby they can understand and, make it relevant to them. But I would leave it there. I would say so far that I think that it's a bit upsetting that it has continued for quite some time. What is your opinion on what has been transpiring?
Well, I think it's very unfortunate, especially when you see instances where parental discipline transcends that line and ends up being a form of abuse. Because, parents are responsible for their children, and parents are the persons who provide for them, give them shelter, clothing, buy their books, all these different things like that, right? And parents do have to maintain some form of discipline in their home. There's the current refrain, and there's the popular phrase that says, don't spare the rod and spoil the child. However, I believe that there must be some form of limitation as it relates to what parents are allowed to do within the confines of their home. Because I believe, as a result of our history, we have a history of oppression in these Caribbean islands. So when you think about things like slavery and indentureship and all these different things like that, and it's a very brutal history, and somewhere along the line that brutality has been passed from generation to generation. So sometimes parents take out their frustration on the children. All right, a father may have lost his job, or persons may be having problems in their marriage and these different things like that. Children may be seen with their grandparents who find it is unfair that the child is left with them. And they take out the frustration on the children. And many times these children, some of them unfortunately lose their lives. But then what about those who are scarred mentally and emotionally as a result of what they would have endured as children? And then there's the whole aspect now of what sort of help is available for them in terms of psychosocial support. Not everyone can afford to go and see a therapist privately. All right. And on the state side of it, there are certain things available, but the question is to what extent? Is it that you can only get one session? Is it that you get enough sessions until you have overcome the problem? Or is it that you have a limited amount of sessions? So all these different things would really impact upon a child's growth and development, their adulthood, and even their likelihood to fall through the cracks in society and end up becoming a miscreant, a deviant, a criminal, all these different things, right? Many of these persons, many of these children who end up on the street and end up in crime and violence and so on, they were abused in some form when they were growing up. And many of them felt as though no one stood up for them, nobody protected them, and they turn against society now. You see? So I believe as a society, we really need to be more of our brother's keeper. We really need to pay closer attention to what is going on in our communities, in our families, with these children, and create these safe spaces whereby they can now come out and say if something is happening to them, say something if they are unhappy. And we also need to have a conversation on what is appropriate punishment. It can't be appropriate that you beat a child until they are cuts on their skin, or they dislocate joints and break hand and break foot and all those different things. And that could never be appropriate. To me, those things would be bordering upon abuse. That sort of excessive licks, as we say in Trinidad. Those sort of things would be bordering on abuse.
Yeah, I agree with you. But you see, you would have raised you touch on a point that I too, when I was in my adolescent stage of my life, um, always been told, heard it from my grandmother, heard it from my mother, that you spare the rod and you spoil the child, right? So I think culturally, and you did touch on you know slavery and some of those cultural effects that it would have had on us in terms of raising children and stuff like that. So we have found ourselves in a very precarious situation because you're getting it religiously that you can beat, and then you have been raised culturally as well to understand and accept that a spanking, licks, as we just say, is also acceptable. So we have found ourselves really in a difficult situation. And sometimes these habits are difficult to break because it has gone on from generation to generation. You even said the thing about the trauma. The funny thing about the trauma part of it is that that child can be depressed, but then we could also have the trauma affecting the child in a way whereby because he or she has been experiencing abuse, physical abuse in the home, it is okay for him or her when there's time for them to make their children, when they are adults, to continue that trait, continue that habit. And then we end up in a position whereby it is a continued, is a recurring decimal. It's non-stop. It continues unabated without any question because it's acceptable religiously, culturally, and personally as well, whereby you have experienced your trauma now and it is okay to do such. But the topic, as you said there, the what is appropriate discipline of children, I as well would agree that discipline whereby after the discipline is handed down, the after effects of it is effects on the body, physical effects, visible ones, um, breakage of bones and things like that, or even death. Of course, it is barbaric. It is absurd, and it is something that needs to stop. Um, I remembered in my earlier years, I was one of those persons that I didn't have a problem with licks in the sense where I found it as okay once that line is not crossed. And I guess we could touch on that. What is crossing the line? Because it's difficult to really tiptoe around that line of discipline versus abuse. It's very, very difficult to establish a boundary, right? But I will have been one of those persons that was okay with licks, as well as I think it was okay to beat your children. I was one of those persons, and I think once that line is not crossed, but I think as years went by, education and otherwise, listening to what the psychologists had to say about the matter, I agreed that I've made my personal decision. I don't have children of my own, but I am of that opinion that it is inappropriate to beat a child. Now, I will tell you why I think it was okay for me to see licks as appropriate. I remember, and you and I would have been in school at the time, where we would have had a former prime minister that would have removed spanking in the classrooms. And I remember it like it was yesterday, whereby it was almost overnight whereby after that was made law, or that was policy in the classroom,
No
there
more
was an
licks.
increase. Yeah, exactly. There was an increase in discipline in the classroom, right? And I realized that if you don't beat these children, this was my opinion at the time. If you're not beating these children, you're going to get that indiscipline in the classroom. And for me now, indiscipline versus back then when there was corporal punishment in the classroom, it's a big difference. It's a massive difference in how indisciplined these children are now. Now, is it an indicator of how much parents are not present in the homes? Has that been the change over the years? Or is it that really it is tied to the lack of corporal punishment? Because Trinidad has become and continues to be very industrious. There has been a continuous rise of women in workplaces. And women generally has been that presence to say they would do the discipline at home. The father as well. But really the woman, you would always see the woman as the person, children would say, my mommy used to beat bad, You never really hear
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
father
The,
part.
the, the mother would be the principal agent of the discipline.
Correct. But tell me, what you think is appropriate discipline, and comment on that for me in terms of the classroom and corporal punishment part.
Yeah, I as well would have been in primary school, and I remember when that decision was taken to outlaw corporal punishment. And as children, I remember there was a certain degree of confusion. We were thinking, well, they are unable to beat us again. So what does that mean? Does it mean now that we don't have to listen to our teachers again? Is it that we can do whatever we want? And we quickly realized that was not the case, because at the primary school where I went to, the teachers stopped using the whip. So they found ways to basically have certain technicalities where they could have still used their hand and hit you a few lashes and so on. But it wasn't to the degree of when licks was official and there was go over whip and all those different things like that. So we are talking about, we can safely say, over 20 years or almost 20 years ago when that decision was taken. And from that time until now, there have always been these sort of discussions in terms of, okay, we have taken away corporal punishment at the school level, but what about at home? It is my belief that parents have the right to discipline their children. And I would say that once it doesn't cross that line, I believe corporal punishment should still be available as a tool to the parents. I don't think that it is something that should be outlawed. I don't think that the state should really come into the home in that manner as it relates to the manner in which parents discipline their children. I, as well, would have received corporal punishment growing up, and in preparation for the show today, I was thinking back on my own childhood experience. And based on my recollection, I didn't get any licks when I got in secondary school. So from the time I reached that sort of age, my parents would more or less reason with me, take away privileges and so on. So I didn't get any licks, even though in situations where some people might say I may have deserved licks, right? For example, a parent coming in school and not getting a good report for Parents' Day and all these different things, but I didn't get any licks, all right? But when I was in primary school, at that very tender age, you're talking about before the age of 12 and so on, sometimes children don't always listen. They tend to be very mischievous. They tend to be very miserable, as we like to say. And sometimes the corporal punishment is just a way to let them know that, hey, what you are doing is not acceptable. And the parent has this tool that could be used as discipline, right? Because sometimes when you tell them at that age, don't do this and don't do that, sometimes they're watching you and laughing, they're watching you and laughing, and they don't obey, they don't comply. So then now the tail is wagging the dog, whereby the parent is in a situation, then okay, what am I doing? I'm taking away your privileges, I'm sending you to your room, I'm giving you a timeout, and all these different things like that. And you are watching me in my face and you are not listening to me. What do I do? You know? The parent has to have that tool to be able to say, yeah, what happened? Go and bring the belt. You know? And from the time a parent says that, all stripping is cut. You know, we who grew up in those days, we know about that. From the time, you know, your mother says, go and get the belt. All that nonsense, all that stripping is cut because you know what is coming next. So I don't think it should be outlawed. I really don't think it should be outlawed. I think that perhaps they could have some sort of uh, programs in place, as you were saying, in terms of sensitizing the parents as to what constitutes abuse and the effects and the long-term effects that it has on the children, as opposed to simply just taking it away, as have been done in many other countries. And, you know, we like to pattern after what is being done in other parts of the world and so on. But sensitize the parents as to what constitutes abuse and sensitize the children as to the avenues that are available to them if they choose to, if they need to report any form of abuse. All right, and enforce the law as it relates to children, because we have so much legislation. We have the Children Act that has so many provisions to protect children, prevention of cruelty to children. You can incur a fine of up to $5,000 on summary conviction, plus 6 months imprisonment, and the list goes on and on. So there are statutory remedies available. All right, but in order for the legislative process and the statutory process and the criminal process to kick in, somebody has to make a report. Somebody has to say, this is happening, this child at such and such location and so on, and then the state mechanisms would kick in. So I would say that it's a complicated problem that calls for a multi-pronged approach in terms of the solutions. I don't know if you had any thoughts in terms of what can be done from a solution standpoint.
Well, I touched briefly on it earlier, which was, you know, sensitization of the public. Now, I talked about it directly for children in terms of, you know, if there's things for them to, avenues for them to reach out, medium. We have the child line, 800-4321, you know. If there's community police in a lot of communities where, you know, you can go and speak with them. And then, you know, we still have communities throughout Trinidad and Tobago whereby you have that community really raising the child. That it happens, but in a lot of country type communities, I hardly see it, but I see it from time to time when I, you know, traverse in the countryside of Trinidad and Tobago. But I would also say that directly for parents, I also think that it requires sensitization of what constitutes child abuse, and, you know, what is important for the parent to recognize in terms of what is going on with their child. That might just not be that they feel to be a troublemaker, but there is something within them, whether they're not accepting themselves, whether they are going through some trauma that the mother or father might not be aware of. There could have been a passing in the family, and, you know, sometimes children lack that, because of their age, they lack that reasoning and that ability to put everything together and understand things in perspective, you know. So it is important for parents to be aware of what is really going on with their child. I think that the government should also implement a program or a program whereby the state provides consultation free of charge. Discussions, counseling free of charge. Now, yes, we have social workers, but let us have it in a proper context where we know the Children's Authority is for that. We know there's a 800-432-1, which is the child line for children. Let us have a special group or department within social development, or what the appropriate ministry. I think that most likely will be it, whereby you have that outlet for parents to pick up their children if they're having difficulties with their children, to go and seek a professional counselor, a psychologist, or a competent authority. I think that would really help, right? And it is a good initiative. It will be a good initiative. It will be well received. And I think that it will go a long way because, like I told you before, I agree that I don't believe in corporal punishment. I think I made that clear. That's a personal decision with how I would run the show in my house. However, I am not going to shun a parent who does that in their home. However, I think there is a line that should not be crossed. I agree with that. And I have been a recipient of corporal punishment throughout my life, both in school and at home. So I would safely say that there is a positive. There was a benefit for me, I would say personally. However, times are changing, and that's why I don't really think it's the best approach. However, if people choose to do that within their own home, once that line is not being crossed and the parents are being sensitized as to what constitutes child abuse, then I don't particularly have a problem. But quickly, Colin, I don't think we would have touched exactly on what exactly is crossing the line. What do you think crossing the line? For me, crossing the line is if there is a physical mark or something that is so traumatizing. But then how do you measure those things? Tell me, what do you think?
To me, there are so many ways to cross the line. So, for example, I would say the frequency of corporal punishment. So, if every little thing a child does is corporal punishment, I would say you would be crossing the line and headed into the child abuse. All right. We could also look at things such as the verbal abuse, name calling, saying negative words that are designed to destroy a child's self-image and their self-esteem, right? We can also talk about things like, as you said, leaving marks on their body, breaking their bones, spraining their hand and feet, and things like that, putting the child in a situation where they may become injured, trying to escape corporal punishment. All those different things are definitely examples of corporal punishment going too far. And I will also add the state of mind that the parent is in when they are administering the corporal punishment can also give rise to situations where the line is being crossed. So, for example, if a parent is under the influence of alcohol or drugs or some substance, their judgment would be inhibited and they are likely to administer more corporal punishment than would be necessary. All right? So all these different things would be examples of where children are not being disciplined or corrected, but are actually being abused.
Now, I agree with you. I too have that opinion on those are things that for me constitutes crossing the line and abuse. But what I would tell you in regards to that, it is so easy to cross the line.
I know you have a lot of value you have to add, but let's just take a quick break and then we'll come right back. Stay with us. welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Leonardo, you were saying?
Yeah, I was just saying right before we went to the break there that, it's so easy to cross the line. And I think that because of how the line is sometimes blurred as well, it could be blurred for a lot of parents. That is why my opinion is that it should not happen at all, because it requires parents to perceive information in a particular way. Whereas if you outlaw it completely, right, and you give parents an option as to how to treat with these issues, you wouldn't have that possibility of abuse going on along the lines of corporal punishment. Now, I'm not saying that if we outlaw it completely, there would be no more child abuse. There would still be child abuse that's happening, right? But it's easier for the state to decipher what is really going on there. Did the parent cross the line? Didn't they cross the line? And that opinion comes into there, and it could get very complicated. So I think that we should just be outlawed completely. But in a perfect world, and I would agree with you, if it is that the line is not being crossed, I would be okay with that. And I would leave it there.
Well, this is one of those occasions where we'll have to agree to disagree in terms of our convictions where it concerns the whole issue of corporal punishment. And I'm sure those of you who are listening to us, some of you would be for, some of you would be against. But from a legislative standpoint and an administrative standpoint, the state would need to have an idea of what are the wishes of the population, as it relates to this issue, because it don't make sense just passing a bill that may not be able to be enforced or that may not have that popular support whereby you would get that type of buy-in. All right, so this has really been such an excellent episode where we were just able to both have this heart-to-heart and share our thoughts on this important issue. And I know going forward from time to time, we would just mix it up a bit and we just kick back and have a discussion. All right. So I really would like to just sensitize you to some, as I always do at the end of every episode, as we come to the end. I want to remind you to check us out on social media. On Facebook, we are the Legal Corner Podcast Series. On Instagram, we are at the Legal Corner Podcast. We are also on Patreon if you are interested in supporting our work. If you enjoyed the show, we'd like to ask you to kindly share it with your friends and family. This would help more people to find out about us and to enjoy our content. Also, feel free to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. We'll also love it if you subscribe to our podcast on whichever podcast player you are using, so you won't miss any of our future episodes. Special and heartfelt thanks to the members of our promotional team who are helping us to get our message out. Bye for now, and God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Corner podcast series. For more information, please visit us at our Facebook or Instagram pages or send your comments to thelegalcornerpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.